Well, I really appreciate your coming out here today. My name is Jeanne Emmons. I want to thank you for coming, and I also want to thank Tracy Bennett, Teresa Jackson, Joe Halass, Rex Towns, and everybody at the Betty Strong Encounter Center for all you do to expand the minds and hearts of our community. So I hope you've had a chance to read some of these quotes. I'm not going to discuss any of those. I just wanted to have them going. My talk is called A Journey Through the Underworld in Search of My Mother, Poems by Me. These poems are from a collection I've been working on for over 10 years since my mother's death, and they chronicle the process of my grieving for my mother. Now, I realize the big elephant in the room is here we are at holiday time and joyful and everything, and we're talking about death and grief. And my husband, when he heard what I was doing, said, "Happy holidays." But I think that many people at this time of year feel very acutely the loss of a loved one. And I'm hoping that if you are one of these, that you may feel a little less lonely as you hear these poems. I want to use the journey through the underworld as a metaphor for the grieving process. And I wanted to do this partly because my mother was a Latin teacher. In these poems, I've borrowed from Greek and Roman concepts of the underworld, or Hades, a little bit from Dante. When my brother heard about this collection, he asked, "Are you saying Mother is in hell? That you're going to go looking for her through the underworld?" And of course, he knew better than that, because he took 4 years of Latin from my mother, as I did, and he knows that Hades is not just hell, right? It includes the Elysian Fields, the Isles of the Blessed, and everybody goes to Hades after death. So I ask you, though, not to think too much about theology as you listen to these poems. These are not what I think happens after death. I think that remains a great mystery. I'm trying, and I'm also not taking you through Kubler-Ross's 5 stages of grief. So it's not about that, though you may recognize some of them here. These poems are just about one person's attempt, mine, to come to terms with the death of a loved one. So the landscape in these poems is an imagined landscape, intended to show metaphorically what grief was like for me. And before I begin reading poetry, I wanted to say, and I said this the last time I read here, if you are not used to poetry or poetry is not your bag, don't worry about it, and please don't think like, what does it really mean? You know, just try to let the images wash over you and the sounds and the music of the language wash over you. And hopefully you'll get something out of it. Maybe you won't understand every line. I hope that you will, and I hope that it won't be that difficult for you. So I'm going to begin with a poem called Your Latin. Your love was our native language, a word daily conjugated up and down the stairs of our house. Amo, amas, amat. The sound of it embedded as deep in the walls as the smell of Daddy's pipe smoke. Everything afterwards was only derivation. Even as you declined us, you embraced us. In and out of school, magistra, you inscribed us with the fine red nib of your intelligence, composed us with the light tap of your chalk on the board, so that the division of Gaul was a dogma as certain as the 3 parts of God, and the sweep of history always shushed in our ears. Even the sound of the name Caesar was like the stroke of your broom on the linoleum of the kitchen floor. Oh, mater, how you did mother us. We all knew without looking it up where gentle came from. Gens, family. those ancient etymologies, planted so deep in the lexicon of childhood, they carried the entire genetic code of connection. Now they unfold so fast that every day seems a school day, and you rushing us out the door. Tempus fugit, nunc amus, let's go. The first section of my collection is about the unreality of death, and I felt this. I think many people feel it when a loved one dies. Suddenly things just don't seem real. The day after my mother died, I felt this way, so I went to the mall. And that's where all the bright lights and the abundance of unnecessary luxuries are. And that seemed the best place to be for me. The title of this poem is Underclothes, Shopping for a Dress to Bury You In. I should mention that almost all the poems in this collection have the word under in the title, because it's the underworld. Underclothes, shopping for a dress to bury you in. The day you died, the grief in my throat unswallowed, I shopped for your last dress. You had been so long in that dim room, in muumuus and sweatpants, your legs big as tree stumps in compression hose that cut deep grooves, your feet swollen out of your enormous shoes. I wanted it to be floaty, feminine, with ruffles or a bow, weightless, shimmering, nothing stiff like a suit, something you could move in if you were going to move, something you would have worn with cologne and rhinestones, blotting your lipstick, leaving that red kiss on the tissue, and me in my pajamas, adoring. In the bridal shops, the clerks kept asking when the wedding was going to be. Daddy loved navy on you, and so I bought the midnight blue, in case he would be standing on the shore, in case he would be free to hold you, all decked out in those fabric flowers and iridescent beads to catch the light, if there were going to be light, with chiffon sleeves to cover your bruised arms. I refused the earrings with their clamps, the hated bra, the shoes. And off you went, mother, in your closed boat, to float barefoot and bare-legged, beyond me, my dress-up games, leaving me with all my grief undressed, clutching this tissue with no visible kiss. When anyone near me has died in the past, I have wanted nothing more than to see them one last time. I've wished they would haunt me, appear to me as a ghost. It's never happened except in dreams, and that doesn't count. So in these poems, I try to unite with my mother by taking a trip to the underworld to find her. If you're going on a trip to Hades, what should you take with you? What kind of shoes should you take? Do you need a sweater? A hat? I have a poem called Packing the Underwear, in which I'm trying to decide what to take. And I'm not going to read the whole poem, but I'm going to read you the last stanza, which is called Accessories. The sneakers, then, and the garden hat, and the black bag, into which I throw a handkerchief, a change purse, pen, spiral notebook, granola bar, 3 rawhide bones and dog biscuits, the umbrella for the fecal downpour. My hand hovers over the jewelry box, and I choose your pendant of lapis lazuli to remind me of what I'm leaving behind. The twilit sky, the sea of ultramarine. So having packed, I'm now ready to set off. But how do you get to the underworld? Odysseus in Homer had to dig a trench and fill it with the blood of sacrificial animals. Persephone was kidnapped by Hades. Dante entered through a dark wood, led by Virgil, his guide. In my case, I have a dream in which I take the elevator down. This is an excerpt from my poem, Descent. Elevator doors whump open, and I step into absolute darkness. No LL, G, B, no lighted button, no raised star, no braille. Just the sound of the doors meeting and a sudden stomach-dropping descent into deeper darkness, cold. And somewhere a winch whines and something clanks, and then the squeak and high squeal of braking and the clunk of the doors opening, and my eyes need time to adjust to the light of dreams, by which I hope to find you gliding, lithe, among the stalwart trunks and shushing of the crepe myrtle trees. That's the end of that poem. But when my eyes adjust and I emerge from the elevator, I'm in a strange and bizarre place. And this really begins this section of the book, and I almost hesitated to read from these poems because they're so weird. But I decided it was an important part of my book. And you have to bear with me because this feeling of unreality is what I'm trying to get across. And this first section of my book is about the unreality of her death, how the world is suddenly unfamiliar and bizarre. So the images are surreal and weird. And here's the beginning, just the beginning of my poem, Wonderworld, Wonderworld. I'm Dorothy, opening the farmhouse door, expecting Kansas and finding Oz, all technicolor, lit by fluorescent pendants that dangle from a low ceiling painted to look like the sky. And the red-orange of neon signs blink and point this way and that. Abandon all hope, ye who enter here, says one. But the words rainbow over an enormous eye that opens and closes in a slow wink, wink. On a billboard, an arrow chases around the word Styx, S-T-I-C-K-S. Another points to the Elysian fields and shows a giant hand rhythmically squeezing a bulbous pink breast. You would not be caught dead there, mother. Well, that wasn't what I expected to find when I got to the underworld. But I'm determined to find my mother, so I press on. I should say that living people are not allowed in the underworld. And if you do go there, you're not supposed to come back. But then all the great stories of the underworld are of living people who've descended and returned. And this is a list of just some of them who've gone into the underworld, or into the world of death, the realm of death, and come back. And I include here, towards the end, Frodo, Gandalf, and Aragorn. If you've read Tolkien, you know what I'm talking about there. Alice, I'm going to talk a little bit more about Alice later, who goes down the rabbit hole. Lazarus, who descends to the dead and returns. And Jesus, who harrows hell. Dorothy goes to an overworld, but it's very similar in some ways to the underworld. If you're going to go down there, you have to pass through some obstacles because you're not supposed to be there as one of the living. And one of these obstacles is Cerberus, the three-headed dog. He guards the gates of Hades. I have another slide of him. This is a very famous illustration for Dante's Inferno by Gustave Doré of Cerberus, the three-headed dog. And there you see Virgil giving him a handful of mud, and that's what he uses to pacify Cerberus, handful of mud. And you can see Dante in the background there. This is just the end of my poem called Underdogs, Cerberus. I have come too far to turn back now. I reach into my bag and feed each mouth a dog biscuit between the rows of razor teeth. Then, wishing for steak, a rawhide bone, I sidle past and they gnaw resentfully, their eyes fixed on hammer-hearted me. So I gave Cerberus doggy treats that were a little better than what Virgil gave to Cerberus, but I do get by, so I do get by. Another obstacle to entering the underworld is Charon. He is the ferryman of the Styx, who ferries the souls of the dead across the River Styx. That's in Virgil, it's the Styx. In Homer, it's the Acheron River. And you have to pay him a coin to get across. They used to place a coin under the tongue of the dead to pay their way down into Hades. In my version, Charon is a fisherman named Charlie, and he has a Cockney accent, which I will not attempt to imitate. And the fare to cross has inflated. In my vision, the Styx is spelled S-T-I-C-K-S, and it's a stinking marsh, which actually is true also in Dante. And it contains beaver dams, hence Styx. Here's an excerpt from my poem, Underpass, Crossing the Styx. We're talking here about Charon, the ferryman. His beard and jeans have seen too much cleaning of fish, with blood and scales stuck here and there. I have my coin, I say, digging into my bag. I open my palm. He squints at my penny. It might as well be a dog turd. Fare's gone up since Virgil, he says. He blinks at me, then eyes my bag. Got any folding money in there, love? I pull out a 20, and he snatches it and holds it up under a kerosene lantern that hangs from a pole attached to his boat. Its light unreflected in the black water. All right then, but don't tell nobody. He reaches out his hand, and I step in and stow my bag under the damp seat. He pushes off with one of the oars, swings us around, and starts rowing into the stream, into the steam of the stinking marsh. So, as I said, most of these Underworld poems at the beginning of the Underworld poems deal with unreality. And I have a poem, I'm not going to read to you from this poem, but it references Hieronymus Bosch's Garden of Earthly Delights, which is a triptych, and you have Eden on the left side, you have the Garden of Earthly Delights in the middle, and then you have the Underworld, or Hell, on the right. And the one on the right is full of nightmarish imagery. All of them are bizarre, but this one is really full of nightmarish imagery. Here's a detail from it. You probably can't see it very well, and it's okay. You don't have to look at any of the images particularly, but I would like you to notice there's a rabbit right in the middle. And we're going to get to the rabbit in just a minute. Because another Underworld story is Alice in Wonderland. By Lewis Carroll, that was his pseudonym. His real name was Charles Dodgson. Wonderland is really an underworld because she has to go down the rabbit hole to get down there. And if you've read the book and not just seen the Disney movie, you know that the sensible Alice is constantly nonplussed by the absurdity of of the underworld that she's visiting. The characters she meets are insane, literally, like the Mad Hatter, or bizarre, like the hookah-smoking caterpillar, or creepy, like the Duchess, or homicidal, like the Queen of Hearts. So it's really a kind of a nightmarish place that she visits. But Alice herself is very reasonable. She's too reasonable to belong there. Curiouser and curiouser, she keeps saying. So I'm going to read to you my entire poem, Wonderland, Wonderland. Now that I have finally followed you down here, Mother, I can see that Charles Dodgson must have been suffering some great grief to let Alice fall into her deep rabbit hole all alone. That corrugated vaginal wall slowing her descent. Well, not quite alone, because he went after her. Invisible, tilting behind her back into that madcap tea party, watching her sip oolong in the lap of insanity with her unflappable manners. What anguished tremor or monsoon of sadness did he hope to quell in himself, setting her among the mushrooms, with her placid sense browbeaten by caterpillars, vanished cats with smiles extant, hedgehog balls, and swinging flamingos? He was trying, maybe, to work out some private conundrum when he had her fend for herself with the cold caterpillar, the mock turtle, the peppery duchess, while he came skulking after, taking it all down. He wrote her reasonable beyond reason, maddeningly so, calm to the point of lunacy. But as I shadow you down, Mother, I have no Alice to buffer me against the bizarre. I sniff the air for a mere whiff of the taboo you wore. Instead, a picnic table materializes, a depression glass plate piled with finger sandwiches, crustless, ham salad, pimento cheese, no pomegranate seeds. A neon sign flashes, "Eat me." And though my famished stomach yawns and spit floods my mouth, I turn and run, lickety-split, deeper into the absurd of your death. So that first theme was unreality, and now I'm going to move to a second theme that I think affects all of us who have lost someone. And that is the feeling that the memory of the loved one is fading, and that we want to retain it. We want to hear their voice. We want to be able to see their face clearly, and yet somehow, even though we yearn for them, we can't see them so clearly anymore. This is my poem, Underdeveloped. You said I was developing, Mother. So you took me to buy my first bra, confessing you had always felt flat-chested, underdeveloped. The department they called foundations sat in the middle of the store, so everyone could see a young girl fingering the lace. How I longed to slip behind the slips, disappear beneath the girdles and hose. In the dressing room, you sat on the bench while the clerk measured, kindly, delicate, with her tape around my bare chest. I cringed, too mortified even to meet your eyes. Now you are mortified, measured, and fitted, entrenched in the foundations. Today I strain to find you where you live, to fix your features. The old Polaroids developed on their own, humming out of that squat box. The image a ghost at first, until you waved your hand, and the picture deepened in color, clarity, flushed to life. But your face pales, recedes, undevelops. You fade, blench, and blur. With a buzz and whir, you withdraw again into the narrow slot of the camera obscura. As I journey through the underworld, I catch brief glimpses of my mother. And I'm going to give you now the first one. And that, again, I can't get a good look at her. This is called Under the Weather. I'm peering across a lake, ruffled with wind, looking for you. And I think I see you, dabbling your toes in the water, dreaming of something, with that familiar faraway smile on your face. It begins to rain, and you do not move. Your hair goes flat, and then streams with water. And the lake is rough now, its waves washing over your knees. And then the rain is a veil behind which you smile, just as before, just before you dissolve. We try very hard to retain that image of the loved one, to see and hear them again distinctly. But forgetfulness works both ways. We forget them, and perhaps they forget us. So I want to talk a little bit about Lethe. There are 5 rivers in the underworld by most accounts of the ancients. You have the Styx, the river of hatred, the Acheron, the river of sorrow, Cocytus, the river of lamentation, Phlegethon, the river of fire or blood in Dante, and most interesting to me, Lethe, the river of forgetfulness. In the Roman view, the dead who crossed Lethe would forget their former lives, and that prepared them for reincarnation into a new body. This is the river you have to cross in Virgil, in the Aeneid, which my mother taught us in 4th year Latin, all right? In the Aeneid, you have to cross Lethe in order to get to the Isles of the Blessed, or in order to get to the Elysian Fields, where surely my mother must be, right? Because that is paradise. But if I cross it to find her, if I have to cross Lethe to find my mother, will I then forget her? And in this poem, I'm avoiding touching the water of the river, but it begins to rise. So this is called Undercurrent, Crossing Lethe. I am threading a creek bed full of boulders, hopping from one flat rock to the other without wetting my feet in the narrow trickle in the middle. Water the color of breast milk, translucent, almost blue. I reach the other side and something rumbles. Lightning spears down, electrifies me, leaves me charged. Raindrops like pellets of jelly or falling frogs plop around me and drench my hair and clothes. I dig in my bag for my umbrella, the one I would never have brought, except for the low murmur of your voice in my memory, Mother. I open it, and rain globules thud on the nylon membrane. A curtain of water encircles me. The milky trickle grows to a rivulet, a stream, shifting the stones. I back up the slope, watch it seethe and swell. I climb onto a boulder and fold up my knees. Milk rises and foams, spits droplets, washes my island of stone. In the rain shadow of the black umbrella, I huddle and wait for oblivion to engulf me. But the storm forgets itself. The river settles down and slides by, swift and smooth as a swath of satin. I cannot think how I will cross back over. So in these poems, Lethe begins as a lake, and then it becomes a river, and finally it flows into a sea, the Sea of Lethe, which is not accurate according to the classics, but in my poems it is. So I have a poem in which I realize that Lethe is a vast ocean, and I won't read you that poem. But then at the edge of this ocean, I catch a glimpse, another glimpse of my mother and my father. And there they are. Undersea. On this stretch of subterranean sand, I keep walking, looking for my mother. The ocean's full of whitecaps, and the surf rolls and curls toward shore, then flows backwards with tumbling clumps of green seagrasses and shells cartwheeling. This sun dazzles, but can't be real. Must be a lamp suspended from a ceiling painted blue. I can feel my pupils contract to tight pinheads of pain. I blink and see dozens of young couples lounging on army blankets, olive drab wool. A man stands with his back to me, raises a Kodak 35 millimeter, puts his eye up to the viewfinder, and points it at his friend who wears baggy, soggy trunks and grins. A private whose privates now must shrink from the cold and wet of his suit, but one day will enlarge, engorge, engender me. I recognize him from the wedding album they kept in their bedroom closet, those pages I dipped into over and over as a child. He picks up a woman in a damp one-piece, and she reclines in his arms, her small breasts against his chest, legs outstretched, those thighs from which I will one day slide into the light. She laughs, shades her eyes with her hand. I hear the crunch of the shutter, the irising of the lens in slow motion. Down here, the aperture is always small, the depth of field infinite. I can see past her squint and the man grinning all the way until now. They do not see me. The sun is too bright behind me, perhaps. For them, I do not yet exist. The image blurs and swims. They have nothing to do with me. So blissful that even if they could hear me, I could not loosen my tongue to tell them where they are, have always been. We often refer to the dead as late, as in the late Jimmy Buffett or whatever. In this poem, I play on the meaning of the word late. It can mean delayed. How long will it take to find my mother, to fully comprehend her, who she was? How long will my recovery from my mother's death be delayed? I'm reminded that all light is delayed before it reaches us, because there is a speed of light. It's fast, but it's not, it does take some time for light to reach us. And all sound, even more so, right, takes even more time to reach us. So I reference that. In a sense, everything is late. All the images we have and all the sounds we hear are late coming to us. And I also, in this, reference the fairy story Thumbelina. She's so tiny she could sit inside the blossom of a flower. So this poem has two parts. It's called Underdone, My Late Mother. 1. I should be over you, but I am not. Am not done with you. Am underdone. How long may one wear black, cover the head? How long before the pale shoots of spring worm through the frozen earth and petals open to expose those pollen-studded depths to foraging bees? How long before I am the bloom, before I am the bee, sucking sweetness from the always present moment? Mother, you are never finished. The past keeps nosing into the now. Those nights you sat on the flowered couch and read me Thumbelina. Your voice dawdled on the way down to the conchs of my ears before spiraling in, old sounds, late as the counted seconds from a lightning strike to the rumble of thunder. 2. Even when I thought I had you, held your hand, the face I looked up to lingered a nanosecond, the image slightly delayed on the particles or waves riding to my rods and cones, which reeled you in, infinitesimally aged and changed. You were always my late mother, trailing me, always past, never fast enough to grasp in the flesh of the moment. All is nostalgia, and I, Thumbelina, undergrown, long for your hand to lift and drop me down into the gold-dusted funnel of the honeyed now, to drink until I'm done. But when I bend to sip, the dew of the present is always already gone. And I just wanted to show you this beautiful other illustration of Thumbelina by Eleanor Vere Boyle. Illustrators of children's books are amazing. I am increasingly amazed by them. Mother typed Daddy's dissertation and his infamous letters to the editor, which embarrassed her, but she typed them anyway, on an Underwood typewriter. And this poem has two parts. In the first, Underwood is the typewriter. And in the second, Underwood becomes the dark wood I must go through to return to the world of the living. The dark wood. So first of all, Underwood, part 1. You used that old typewriter to transcribe Daddy's dissertation. Later, I swiped it for college work. It had no power cord, no web, no server, and no motherboard. But it served me well to tell stories or fake the chance poem out of life's inevitable ache. Its steel mass squatted on my desk, and jabbing with my fingers, I possessed the keyboard, punctuated the work. The back key took you back, did not delete. I lacked erasable bond. So I'd ponder each shade of thought. I went slow, each stroke weighed. Looking back, I'm amazed at how driven I was as the dimming ink on the ribbon faded to gray. How I loved the ding of the bell that told in the high soprano of its small knell that the line was done, that it was time to slam the carriage return to the right and start again. 2. The carriage return has now suddenly brought me to the margin stop of a blacker Underwood with underbrush and dense trees. I thought surely I'd find you down here, but I could not. I tried to forget you then, but couldn't. Strange to have bathed in Lethe day after day, unchanged. Only the dead forget, Mother. As for me, a twisted cord connects the umbilicus of grief to memory's placenta. My helpless fingers tremble. This is an Underwood of unease. I am still looking for you. I still linger, hoping to find the margin release. Let me step from Lethe's floodplain of loss into the understory of myrtle and moss, quaking aspen, dogwood, and wild plum, grapevine, redbud, bittersweet. Let me come at last into the Underwood and through, beneath a canopy of shadows, cypress and yew. So that introduces the last section of my book, which is called The Dark Wood. This is a reference to Dante, who entered the underworld through a dark wood. In my case, I leave through a dark wood. And on the way out, I see the gingerbread house. It's kind of a dark picture, so it's hard to see. But this is the gingerbread house, or the candy house. This poem, Undernourished, references Hansel and Gretel. Hansel and Gretel got into trouble by eating a piece of the gingerbread house. When you go into the underworld, you're not supposed to eat anything. Not if you want to come back to the upper world of the living. Persephone was kidnapped by Hades, and when her mother Demeter bargained to bring her back, she could only return for part of the year because she had consumed pomegranate seeds down in the underworld. In this poem, I don't eat, but I do get a third and final glimpse of my mother. And this time, she's finally aware of me. And I was thinking today that this poem is really the sort of the darkest part of my book. I know it's dark, but it gets very dark, and then it starts to come back up at the end of the poem, so you can look forward to that. Undernourished. I thought I would starve down here looking for you, Mother. Over and over I have found food, but I am afraid to ingest anything here below. I am not wanting to stay. In this shadowed valley, the trees drip with moss, overhang my narrow path beside the unmentionable ravine that beckons like a drug. I want blinders. No table has been prepared for me that did not reek of toxic sweetness or the must of mushrooms. My cup has not run over, except with poison. But now there is a whiff of cornbread baking. I follow it to a cottage in a clearing, a candy house, forbidden, seductive, but not the bread smell I long for. You are no witch, and your oven is not meant ever again to house my body. Through the wavy pane of a sugar glass window, I see you in shorts and shirt, young again, dredging chicken. The flour is a glove on your already pale hands. I know you feel me staring, but you do not look up from the black skillet where you lay each soft mound of dead flesh to sizzle in a half-inch of grease. I sense you wanting to look at me as Orpheus was dying to glance back at Eurydice, but you resist, protecting me as always. So I am left staring at the side of your face. A breeze picks up in the linden trees behind me, bringing the faint sweetness of their blossoms as you pull the cast iron pan out of the oven. The cornbread, gold and brown, with steam rising. The smell alone is more than enough, you know, to fill the bowl of my memory up to the brim and over. The understory is, of course, the layer of forest underneath the canopy. But the word understory contains the word story also. And you might notice a lot of fairy stories in my poems. And this is because my mother read me fairy stories every night when I was a child. And I have the idea that the stories my mother told me formed my identity. This entire collection of poetry is called Dead Language, referencing Latin, of course, but also the idea that my mother was my first language. She wrote me, and in turn, I am now writing her. Understory. It was always you who read me the story. You spun my straw into gold. You were the fairy queen, the good godmother. You knitted me the shirts of nettles to make me human again, left me the one wing. You had the wand, the crown, the dress. You carved me out of wood, made me a real girl. All this time I've haunted your underworld, wanting you to come to me, face me, outlive me, look me in the eye, know me, forgive me. But now I know it is my turn to write you backwards. I am neither a mirror nor a lamp. I have to build you like a house to shelter me, build you like a fire to warm me, even as you die. Compose you as you decompose. Compose myself. Bring our duet back into harmony after the long caesura, the whole rest, the bird's eye of the fermata, watching, the empty measures of your death, your fugue of silence. Oh, mother, how I have wished you to ghost me. Today, I dissemble and invent and reassemble you, or someone resembling you. Gather and weld together the rusty spare parts of all that I've missed of you. Draw you into my disheartened arms and kiss you. I used to teach Tennyson's In Memoriam to my students, and it's a long poem sequence, even longer than this. It took up 50 pages of small print in the Norton Anthology of English Literature. And it's a Tennyson's poem elegy on the death of his very good friend, Arthur Henry Hallam. And my students had to read this, of course. They used to say, enough already, he needs to just get over it, you know. Well, you never really get over it. But you can't stay in the dark wood forever either and still be among the living. Death can be seductive. You don't want to be at home there. There's a reason the living aren't allowed in Hades. So this poem is called Under the Illusion. It is warm and dark in this wood of lost tears. The leaf-rot smell rises and sifts down soft to the roots of infant trees. The smooth heads of acorns shed their coarse caps, those top knots and rims of curls that dignify them among the homely brown things of the earth. They crack, and white sprouts squirm out, stretch up, grow wings. I am finding my way in this wood of no stars, following the true north of you, home. I was under the illusion death would leave no footprint. Then, stomped and flattened under that impression, I sniffed dread, lurking under the bed of my grief. Now I smell the sweetness of earth's common compost and feel her arms open to embrace me. I swear I can hear the little horns of fern unwinding out of the dark, the green buds boiling up on the bare limbs. I know that one day, in this wood of no fears, I will be home, but not today. It is time to close my eyes, stretch out my arms, and ride the updraft of April back to the cool sheets of what is left of my life. The origami of grief. I have folded myself forward and back again to find you, bent diagonal and straight till I am nearly torn apart. I have raised up a mountain of mourning, furrowed a valley of sadness, pleaded my cries in repeated corrugations, reversed and pleaded again, fashioned whole pockets of lamentation, then tucked myself into them, turned myself inside out, crimped my pain into sharp points. And still, no boat, no goldfish, no paper crane, no likeness of you. All I want now is to undo myself, lay me flat again, like a sheet on a bed of healing, smooth out the creases of my grief, and sleep. I'm going to skip this one and go to this last one. This one is called sublingual dead language. Sublingual means under the tongue, right? Dead language. This is the last poem I'll read. And again, it goes back to my mother as a Latin teacher. Sublingual dead language. If someone said Latin was dead, it irked you to no end, magistra. So alive it was in you. With the blackboard behind you and the white chalk declensions ranked in orderly columns and the clock hand in your classroom sweeping above a sign that read Tempus Fugit. You raised your arms and taught us a Latin cheer for the football team. At Christmas, your hands conducted Silens Nox and Adeste Fidelis. Back home at bedtime, we whispered, Ego te amo, I love you, into each other's ears. You are always under my tongue, Mother, as alive as you insisted Latin was, against all common sense, your roots still thriving deep within the very lexicon of my life, thrumming with your derivatives, your mammary grammar, my present perfect, imperative, subjunctive. Since your passing, I have wished to believe that the nouns of all 5 declensions, with their modifying adjectives, participles, and subordinate clauses, were marching with quiet dignity toward that inevitable verb biding its time at the end of the sentence, reticent as some mystery, cryptic, withheld, until the veil would be lifted to reveal the soar and flutter of action. Fugit, she flies, or some bright state of being. Est, she is. Thank you very much.